Ask thy soul. Oh, you're funny, aren't you?
For 8 seasons, millions of Americans tuned in every week to spend a little time in Mayberry. The fishing hole, the front porch, the kind of quiet life that felt familiar even if you'd never lived it. But when the cameras stopped rolling, life kept going, in ways both wonderful and heartbreaking. Today, we're finding out what really happened to the cast of The Andy Griffith Show. Andy Griffith, Sheriff Andy Taylor.
Wouldn't be doing any flying tonight because them biscuits can lay awful heavy.
Andy Samuel Griffith was born on June 1st, 1926, in Mount Airy, North Carolina, the very town that inspired Mayberry. He grew up in modest circumstances, and from an early age, music pulled at him. He attended the University of North Carolina on a music scholarship, originally hoping to become an opera singer or a Moravian minister. Acting found him instead. His first real brush with fame came in 1953, when a comedy monologue he recorded called What It Was Football. The story of a country boy baffled by the game sold 1 million copies and put his name on the radio. By 1955, he was on Broadway in No Time for Sergeants, earning a Tony nomination. The film version followed in 1958, and that same year, his dramatic debut in Elia Kazan's A Face in the Crowd showed audiences a darker, more complicated side that Hollywood took notice of. But it was a guest appearance on The Danny Thomas Show in 1960, playing a small-town sheriff who arrested Danny Thomas for speeding, that changed everything. CBS saw something in that character and built a show around it. The Andy Griffith Show premiered on October 3rd, 1960. What made Sheriff Andy Taylor so enduring wasn't the comedy, it was the wisdom. Griffith himself once said the backbone of the show was love, the deep regard these people had for one another. He played the straight man while the show's other characters provided the laughs, and he was wise enough to know that was exactly the right call. When the show ended in 1968, Griffith tried to find his footing again. A couple of follow-up series didn't land the way he'd hoped. Then, in 1983, he was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, a serious neurological illness that left him unable to walk for 7 months. He recovered through rehabilitation, and what came next was arguably the second great chapter of his career. In 1986, he returned to television as Ben Matlock, a sharp-witted Southern defense attorney in the drama Matlock. The show ran for 9 seasons, split between NBC and ABC, and Griffith won the People's Choice Award for it, later saying it was his favorite role. After Matlock ended in 1995, he scaled back his work and turned back to music, recording gospel albums including I Love to Tell the Story, 25 Timeless Hymns, which won a Grammy Award in 1996. In his later years, Griffith lived quietly on Roanoke Island in Manteo, North Carolina, with his third wife, Cindy Knight, whom he married in 1983. President George W. Bush awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2005, one of the country's highest civilian honors. In 2008, Griffith and Ron Howard reprised their Mayberry roles in a Funny or Die skit supporting Barack Obama's presidential campaign, a moment that showed just how much affection they still had for each other and for Andy Taylor. On July 3, 2012, Andy Griffith died of a heart attack at his home on Roanoke Island. He was 86. In keeping with his wishes, there was no public funeral. He was buried in the family cemetery on the island within hours of his passing. Don Knotts, Deputy Barney Fife.
Well, don't just stand there like a ninny. Come on out and shake on it before he changes his mind.
Jesse Donald Knotts was born on July 21, 1924, in Morgantown, West Virginia, the youngest of 4 boys in a family hit hard by poverty and hardship. His father suffered from mental illness, and life at home was often frightening. As a child, Don turned inward and found that making people laugh was something he could do. He served in the U.S. Army during World War II, entertaining troops in a show called Stars and Gripes. After the war, he earned a bachelor's degree in education from West Virginia University in 1948 and moved to New York to try his luck in show business. His big break came on The Steve Allen Show, where his nervous man character, a hilariously jittery everyman being interviewed on the street, made him a star. When Andy Griffith was building his new show in 1960, it was Knotts himself who called and suggested the sheriff needed a deputy. That phone call gave the world Barney Fife. Barney was one of the great comic creations in television history, self-important, easily flustered, forever clutching that one bullet he was allowed to keep in his shirt pocket. Don Knotts won 5 Emmy Awards for the role, one for each of his 5 seasons as a regular cast member. Griffith later said that once he saw how funny Knotts was, he realized immediately that Barney should be the comedian and Andy should play it straight. It was a decision that defined the entire show. Knotts left the series in 1965. Griffith had told him on multiple occasions that he intended to end the show after 5 seasons, and Knotts took him at his word, signing a multi-picture film deal with Universal Studios as the 5th season drew to a close. Then Griffith changed his mind and agreed to keep the show running. By then, Knotts was already committed. He later said he deeply regretted having to leave. The films he made for Universal, including The Incredible Mr. Limpet, 1964, and The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, 1966, were modest hits, beloved by families, and they kept him busy through the late 1960s and into the 1970s. He stayed connected to Griffith over the years, returning for guest appearances as Barney Fife and later playing a recurring neighbor character on Matlock. In 1979, he found another hit as the leisure suit-wearing landlord Ralph Furley on Three's Company, a role he held until the show ended in 1984. In 1998, he made a memorable cameo in Pleasantville, and in 2000, he received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In his personal life, Knotts married 3 times. Those who knew him described him as a quiet, gentle man, nothing like Barney Fife. Betty Lynn, his co-star who played Barney's girlfriend Thelma Lou, called him very quiet, very sweet. TV writer Mark McNear called him the most beloved person in all of show business. Andy Griffith was at his side near the end. Knotts died on February 24, 2006 from pulmonary and respiratory complications related to lung cancer. He was 81. He is buried at Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles. His grave marker reads, "He saw the poignancy in people's pride and pain and turned it into something hilarious and endearing." Frances Bavier, Aunt B. Taylor.
Decided wrong.
Frances Elizabeth Bavier was born on December 14, 1902, near Gramercy Park in New York City. Her plan initially was to become a school teacher. She attended Columbia University, but somewhere along the way, she wandered into the theater and never left. After graduating from the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in 1925, she built a career on the Broadway stage that spanned decades, including a memorable run in Point of No Return, alongside Henry Fonda in 1951. During World War II, she traveled the Pacific with the USO to entertain troops. Her film work included the 1951 science fiction classic, The Day the Earth Stood Still. By 1960, when she was cast as Aunt B, the warm, capable aunt who moves to Mayberry to help widower Sheriff Taylor raise his young son Opie, Bavier was already 57 years old. She brought professional discipline and formidable stage training to a role that asked her to be the moral and domestic center of a fictional family. Behind the scenes, however, things were more complicated. The cast and crew often described her as difficult to work with, professional but emotionally guarded and easily hurt. Andy Griffith once admitted that she simply didn't seem to like him very much, and Ron Howard, who played Opie, noted that she didn't appear to enjoy being around children. The tension between her New York theatrical background and the loose, warm, joke-telling camaraderie of the rest of the cast was something she never fully bridged. Still, she stayed with the show for 10 years, longer than any other character, even continuing as Aunt B after Griffith left, and the show became Mayberry RFD. In 1967, she won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Performance by an Actress in a Supporting Role in a Comedy. In 1972, Bavier retired from acting entirely and moved, sight unseen, into a house in Siler City, North Carolina. She bought it based on photographs alone. "I fell in love with North Carolina, all the pretty roads and the trees," she once said. She had first encountered the state through the show, and she went looking, as she put it, like a child for a fairyland. What she found was quiet. Her later years in Siler City were reclusive. She rarely left the house, and the townspeople mostly knew her by the occasional sighting of her 1966 Studebaker. She had several cats for company. She left a $100,000 trust fund to the Siler City Police Force, with the interest to be paid out as a Christmas bonus to the department each year. When returned to Mayberry, the 1986 reunion television movie was filmed. Bavier was in failing health and declined to participate. The script addressed her absence by writing pointing Aunt Bee out as having already passed away, with Andy visiting her grave. In August 1989, she called Andy Griffith and told him she was sorry for being difficult. It was a reconciliation he later spoke about with visible emotion. On December 6, 1989, Frances Bavier died of congestive heart failure at her home in Siler City. She was 86. She is buried at Oakwood Cemetery in Siler City, and her headstone carries both names, Frances Bavier and Aunt Bee, along with the words, "To live in the hearts of those left behind is not to die." Ron Howard. Opie Taylor. Ron Howard was 5 years old when he was cast as Opie Taylor, the wide-eyed, red-headed son of Sheriff Andy Taylor. He was credited as Ronnie Howard throughout the series, and for 8 seasons, television audiences watched him grow up in real time. Howard was born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma. His father, Rance Howard, was an actor, so the entertainment world wasn't foreign to him. He had already appeared in his first film, The Journey, in 1959. But it was the Andy Griffith Show that made him a household face, and he appeared in well over 200 episodes across all 8 seasons. Even as a child, Howard was watching the directors. He later described how, around age 10, one of the show's directors noticed that he was studying the camera setup and rehearsals even when he wasn't in a scene. That seed planted itself deep. By the time Howard was a teenager, he already knew he wanted to direct. He went on to play Steve Bolander in George Lucas's American Graffiti in 1973, and then landed the role of Richie Cunningham on Happy Days, which ran from 1974 to 1980, and made him a star all over again. But acting was never the destination. He made his directorial feature film debut with Grand Theft Auto in 1977, a deal he brokered with low-budget producer Roger Corman, while still appearing on Happy Days. In 1980, he left the series to direct full-time. What followed was one of the most successful directorial careers in Hollywood history. Splash, 1984, Cocoon, 1985, Backdraft, 1991, Apollo 13, 1995, and then in 2001, A Beautiful Mind, which won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for Howard. He co-founded Imagine Entertainment with producer Brian Grazer in 1986, a company that has produced some of the most beloved films and television series of the last 4 decades. He married his high school sweetheart, Cheryl Alley, in 1975, and they have 4 children together. His daughter, Bryce Dallas Howard, became a successful actress and director in her own right. In February 2025, Howard revealed in interviews that he had recently learned he and Don Knotts were distant cousins, something neither man ever knew during Knotts' lifetime. Today, Ron Howard is the only main cast member of The Andy Griffith Show still living. He remains active in Hollywood, producing and directing well into his 70s, still driven by the same love for storytelling that was sparked on a television set in the 1960s. Jim Nabors, Gomer Pyle.
Go on, put it on, take a think under there. No.
Jim Nabors was born on June 12, 1930, in Sylacauga, Alabama. He grew up in a small town, struggled with severe asthma as a child, and never imagined a career in entertainment. After graduating from the University of Alabama with a degree in business administration, he drifted through jobs: typist at the United Nations in New York, film cutter for NBC in Los Angeles. At night, he performed a hillbilly comedy act at a cabaret theater in Santa Monica called The Horn, where he sang and told stories in a thick southern drawl. That's where Andy Griffith found him. Griffith spotted Nabors at The Horn in the early 1960s and brought him in to play a one-time role on his show, a dim but good-natured gas station attendant named Gomer Pyle. The audience loved him immediately. What started as a single episode turned into a regular role, and what nobody expected was what happened when Gomer opened his mouth to sing. Behind the country boy squawk was a rich, trained baritone voice that stopped people in their tracks. The contrast, the golly, and the operatic power became one of the most startling and delightful surprises in early 1960s television. Gomer became so popular that in 1964, CBS gave Nabors his own spin-off, Gomer Pyle, USMC, in which Gomer joins the Marine Corps. The show ran for 5 seasons, was consistently in the top 10, and finished number 2 in its final season. before Nabors walked away from it in 1969. He later explained that he simply wanted to try something different. He hosted his own variety series on CBS for 2 seasons, became a favorite guest on The Carol Burnett Show. Carol Burnett considered him her good luck charm and always wanted him as her first guest of each new season, and he recorded more than 24 albums. In the 1970s, Nabors moved to Hawaii, where he bought a 500-acre macadamia nut ranch. He largely stepped back from the spotlight, performing occasionally in Las Vegas showrooms and at the Indianapolis 500, where he sang Back Home Again in Indiana every year for decades. His last performance there was in 2014. In 1994, Nabors underwent a liver transplant after contracting hepatitis B, and his health was never fully the same afterward. In January 2013, at age 82, he publicly came out as gay and announced that he had married his partner of 38 years, Stan Cadwallader, in Seattle. "I'm not ashamed of people knowing," he said. "It was just such a personal thing." On November 30th, 2017, Jim Nabors passed away peacefully at his home in Honolulu, Hawaii. He was 87. His husband was by his side. George Lindsey, Goober Pyle.
Well, I've been so busy with my executive work, I forgot to order gas.
George Lindsey was born on December 17, 1928, in Fairfield, Alabama, and grew up in Jasper. He was a gifted athlete, a quarterback in college, who graduated from Florence State Teachers College in 1952 with a degree in bioscience and briefly taught high school science before the pull of acting became impossible to ignore. Lindsey moved to New York, studied theater, and began picking up small television roles. In 1962, he auditioned for The Andy Griffith Show for the role of Gomer Pyle. He thought he had the part. At the last moment, Jim Nabors was cast instead. According to Lindsey's own account in his autobiography, he was so angry when he saw the first episode that he kicked in his television screen. Fate had other plans. In 1964, producers brought Lindsey in to play Goober Pyle, Gomer's cousin, who would take over the Mayberry filling station when Gomer joined the Marines. Goober's Cary Grant impression, his good-natured dimness, and his signature beanie hat, inspired by the Caps mechanics wore at his aunt's gas station back in Jasper, made him a fan favorite quickly. Interestingly, Leonard Nimoy later revealed that Gene Roddenberry's original first choice to play Mr. Spock on Star Trek had been George Lindsey. Lindsey turned it down. Nimoy, of course, got the part, and the rest is history. Lindsey played Goober on The Andy Griffith Show through its final season, and then continued the character on Mayberry RFD for 3 more years. In 1972, he joined the cast of the country music variety show Hee Haw, where he played variations of Goober for 20 years until the show wrapped in 1992. Off-screen, Lindsey was a deeply generous man. For 17 years, he organized the George Lindsey Celebrity Weekend and Golf Tournament in Montgomery, Alabama, raising over $1 million for the Alabama Special Olympics. He established academic scholarships at his alma mater, the University of North Alabama, and in 1998 helped found the George Lindsey UNA Film Festival. He received an honorary doctorate from the university in 1992. He also provided voice work for several Disney animated films, including The Aristocats, 1970, Robin Hood, 1973, and The Rescuers, 1977. In his final years, Lindsey lived in Nashville. Oscar winner Ernest Borgnine once credited their 2-decade friendship with helping him through a serious battle with depression, saying that Lindsey's warmth and humor had saved his life. George Lindsey died on May 6, 2012, in Nashville, Tennessee, from heart failure. He was 83. He is buried at Oak Hill Cemetery in his hometown of Jasper, Alabama. Betty Lynn, Thelma Lou.
I know it.
Then why wouldn't Andy say something to you?
Well, that's the worst of it, the waiting. Why doesn't he just come out?
Betty Lynn was born on August 29, 1926, in Kansas City, Missouri. Before she ever set foot in Mayberry, she had already lived a remarkable life. As a teenager, she performed in USO shows during World War II, entertaining troops across Europe and the Pacific, something she'd been doing since she was barely old enough to drive. She transitioned into film and television in the early 1950s and appeared in a steady stream of projects before landing the role that would define her legacy. As Thelma Lou, Barney Fife's devoted, sweet-natured, occasionally exasperated girlfriend, Betty Lynn became one of the most beloved recurring characters in Mayberry. She appeared in the show for 5 seasons, from 1961 through 1966, staying in step with Don Knotts through all of his run as a regular. When Knotts left the show, Betty Lynn felt the same way about her character. Without Barney, Thelma Lou simply had nowhere to stand. She stepped away from the role rather than continue without its anchor, even though the producers considered keeping her on. She continued working in television through the 1960s and 1970s, with appearances on Family Affair, My Three Sons, The Farmer's Daughter, and Little House on the Prairie, among others. After a quiet period away from the spotlight, she rejoined the Mayberry family for reunion events and specials, and in her later years, she moved to Mount Airy, North Carolina, Andy Griffith's hometown, and the real-world Mayberry, where she became a cherished presence at the Andy Griffith Museum. Fans would travel from across the country just to meet her, and she greeted them with the same warmth she'd given Thelma Lou for years. Don Knotts had always spoken of her fondly, and she of him. It was a friendship that outlasted the show by decades. Betty Lynn passed away on October 16, 2021, in Mount Airy, North Carolina. She was 95 years old. Howard McNear, Floyd the Barber.
Every head a walking testimony.
Howard McNear was born on January 27, 1905, in Los Angeles. Before landing on the Andy Griffith Show, he had built a long career in radio and early television, most notably as Doc Adams on the radio version of Gunsmoke, a role he played for over a decade, long before the television version ever aired. His portrayal of Floyd Lawson, the gentle, rambling, endlessly talkative barber of Mayberry, was one of the show's purest pleasures. Floyd's barbershop was Mayberry's town square in miniature, a place where conversations wandered freely, where nothing was ever quite urgent, and where a man could get a haircut and catch up on 15 years of local gossip in the same sitting. Floyd was never the center of the story, but he made every scene around him richer. McNear played the character with a light touch and a kind of baffled dignity that made him easy to love. In 1963, while still a cast member, McNear suffered a serious stroke that left him partially paralyzed on his left side. He was absent from the show for nearly a year and a half. When he returned in 1965, the production quietly accommodated his limited mobility. Floyd was often shown seated, positioned against a wall, or in situations that minimized the need for movement. Not every viewer knew what had happened. McNear continued to appear until the 7th season, when his health made it impossible to go on. His health declined further after the series concluded. Howard McNear died on January 3, 1969, just months after the final episode aired. He was 63. His gentle, unhurried presence as Floyd remains one of the most endearing things about Mayberry. Aneta Corsaut, Helen Crump. Aneta Corsaut was born on November 3, 1933, in Hutchinson, Kansas. She joined the Andy Griffith Show in its 3rd season in 1963 as Helen Crump, Opie's schoolteacher, and eventually Andy Taylor's love interest and fiancée. Helen was a departure from earlier female characters on the show. She was educated, self-assured, and had opinions, sometimes in conflict with Andy's. The character brought a particular warmth and intelligence to the later seasons of the show. Off-screen, according to the 2015 book Andy and Don, The Making of a Friendship and a Classic American TV Show, Griffith and Corsaut were involved in a long-running affair that was an open secret among the cast and crew. Griffith, who was married at the time, never publicly addressed it. After the show ended, Corsaut continued working in television and film, but she is remembered almost entirely for Helen Crump. She was diagnosed with cancer in her later years and died on November 6, 1995. She was 62. Elinor Donahue, Ellie Walker. Elinor Donahue is a name that doesn't always come up first when people remember the Andy Griffith Show, which is fitting, because she left after just 1 season. Born on April 19, 1937, in Tacoma, Washington, Donahue was already well known to television audiences for playing Betty Anderson on Father Knows Best. When she was cast as Ellie Walker, the town's pharmacist and Andy Taylor's first romantic interest, in the show's 1st season, she thought it would be a fresh start. It wasn't a comfortable fit. Donahue later said she felt like a bird out of a nest. She'd come straight from playing a teenager and didn't yet feel she had the footing for a fully adult role. She also said the chemistry between her character and Andy never quite developed the way anyone hoped. Griffith himself later acknowledged to her that the writers simply hadn't known how to write for her. After 12 episodes, she asked to be let out of her 3-year contract, and the producers agreed. She went on to appear in The Odd Couple, Fantasy Island, The Love Boat, and many other series over the following decades. Now, in her late 80s, Elinor Donahue is among the very few surviving cast members of the original show, a town that never left. Mayberry was never a real place, but the feelings it gave people were entirely real. The Andy Griffith Show understood something about human nature that doesn't go out of fashion, that people are basically decent, that small kindnesses matter, and that laughter is one of the ways we take care of each other. Andy Griffith himself once said the backbone of the show was never talked about on set, never written into the scripts. It was just there, in every scene. The deep regard these people had for one another. The people who made that show. Andy Griffith, Don Knotts, Francis Bavier, Jim Nabors, George Lindsey, Ron Howard, Betty Lynn, Howard McNear, Aneta Corsaut, and so many others. They were just people. Complicated, talented, warm, difficult, funny, private, sometimes lonely. They spent years together in a fictional world that was more peaceful and good-natured than the real one. And then they each went on and lived their actual lives with all the grief and illness and joy and accomplishment that entails. What they left behind still runs on television every day somewhere in the country. The same stories, the same characters, reaching new generations of viewers who weren't even born when the final episode aired in 1968. That kind of staying power is rare. Not everything earns it, but Mayberry did, because somewhere beneath all the jokes and the fishing trips and the porch sitting and the church socials, the show was telling the truth about something. The fishing hole is still there in our memories, and so are they. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know, and there's plenty more stories like this one coming your way.